to First Take State of the Nation from the Southside YMCA in Chicago. Joining us now, we are so pleased to have Chicago native and Hall of Famer Isiah Thomas with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We shared earlier the staggering statistics regarding violence here in your community, and I know how socially conscious you are. What have you been doing to promote change here in Chicago? Well,
the first thing we did, and we got Father Flager sitting there right now, you know, the first thing that we did when I came back home several years ago, and I never left Chicago, was just try to put recreation, sport, and play back into the community. Because when you disinvest out of the community, the first thing that they shut down in our community is play and recreation. And when you don't have play and recreation, that means I don't get to know you. I don't get to play with you. And my physical fitness starts to deteriorate. And when you disinvest with play and recreation, then you disinvest in education. And you say to us, our school systems are failing. Then from an employment standpoint, where can we find jobs? And when you talk to a lot of these kids, the first thing they say is, we don't have anything to do. There's no place to go. So the first thing that we wanted to do is just bring people together in a place of recreation, in a place of play, where now you can start dispensing information. And when we started dispensing information, kids found out that they really do like each other. And when we first started the peace games here in Chicago, we had kids who couldn't cross certain boundary lines. So our first peace game, we had to literally bus, carpool kids in because they wouldn't, no, I'm sorry. That was the second year they started carpooling and busing together. The first year, they didn't want to cross those boundary lines, so we had to figure out ways to get them there. And I'll never forget, we were downstairs in the church hall, and one of the kids said after the game, he said, you know what? You were shooting at me last week. He said, but you know what? You all right. And it's only because they got to know each other, they got to play together. Simple things like that is the start. That's part of the solution in terms of people coming together.
Who could be the primary ignition in all of that? And I ask that question because we all know when we saw the ESPYs, we saw Carmelo Anthony get CP3, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James together and open the ESPYs in a way that resonated globally. Profound impact upon all of us, and all of those brothers should receive tremendous accolades for what they were willing to do. But when we talk about the ignition to get that thing started that you just alluded to, getting the community together, giving opportunities to youngsters or whatever, what role specifically can athletes play, and should they be the ones provoking it, or is there someone else that should be doing it for them?
It's a togetherness. It's a committed understanding that we want to make society better. We want to level the playing field for black and white under this system of race and under this system of racialization. We want to eliminate the stereotypes. We want to eliminate the biases that comes along with skin color and ethnicity and race.
Well, speak to that, because on several occasions, just to give y'all some insight, Isiah Thomas and I go back more than 23 years, and we talk all the time. And one of the things that you religiously talk about is the way players are described. Like, we'll sit up there and we consider it no harm whatsoever. When I say, this dude's a monster, this dude's a beast, or whatever, and then I'll get a call from Isiah Thomas, he's like, I don't like that. You've spoke about that for years. Tell our audience, tell the national audience out there, what's your issue with that?
Well, the dehumanization of the athlete, particularly the African-American athlete. And, you know, when we were fighting to be human, because in the Constitution it was written that we was 3/5. So we wanted to be human. We wanted to have all the rights and liberties of every human being. We wasn't fighting to be black. We wasn't fighting to be Negro. We were fighting to be human. And when you're a human being, now you get all the things that this supposedly America has to offer. But then when you talk about race and racialization, okay, now when we construct the race box and we say black and we say white, and then we get to assign the stereotypes and the biases that goes along in that box of black and white, now we have to operate in this system. Sports is supposed to be the place where these racial biases and stereotypes don't come into play. So this dehumanization doesn't come into play. When we describe athletes as animals, or they have great instinct, or you call them a beast or a monster, you know, the great philosopher Barth said, hey, language speaks, and it carries outside of the playing field. So I saw the commercial on the Undefeated that you was advertising about this show last night, where you had a little kid walk into the corner store with a hoodie on. And you had a white male reaching for something underneath because he felt threatened by the little kid with the hoodie on. The little kid takes it off, and now there's a smile. Well, when we say language carries outside of the playing field and the dehumanization of the athlete, okay, that carries outside. And so now that person is looking at you not as Stephen A. Smith, but if you're not on the show and you got your gear on, I'm seeing the stereotypes, I'm seeing the biases. So that dehumanization of the athlete 20 years ago, people lost their jobs, and you and I talked about this. 20 years ago, people were losing their jobs for referring to athletes as animals, beasts, instincts. Those you lost your job for that. Now it's seen as a compliment. That has to stop.
When you bring up earlier how the playgrounds and the places for kids to play, for African American kids to play, are getting shut, like you want to bring that back. That's heartbreaking to me, because what it says is black children are essentially given the message that you're just surviving, you're not really living. And recently, Richard Sherman was asked about, and I love Richard Sherman, Stanford educated, always has interesting things to say, and a great player, was asked about white athletes' responsibility in all of this, and he said, anyway, I feel, he didn't come out strong, yes, they need to get involved, said it would be nice, but I guess it's not their fight. I feel differently because, if you have a conscience, if you're socially conscious, then it goes back to a threat to justice anywhere, or an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? How do you come down on that subject of kind of not just the African American community or athletes getting involved in these kind of social issues, but the white athletes, which, after all, these are their peers, their partners, their, in the work environment, et cetera?
I look at white silence in these issues as violence. White silence is the equivalent to violence in these issues. When you're not standing up and you're not speaking out for your brother, right? You and I are brothers, regardless of skin color. And this is where this whole race thing, this constructed race thing, really separates us in this country. And that's what we need to get underneath, because any type of mistreatment of you or oppression of you, I have to stand up and speak against that. If you came to my neighborhood, right, and we got, a majority of African Americans in this audience, right? You come into my neighborhood, or you come into our neighborhood, right, and they just not going to take off and start, beating you up because of your skin color. That's not happening. Now, they may rob you for your money, right? They may take your money.
That's right.
Right? But they're not going to look at you as a white brother and say, I'm just going to go off on him and start beating him up, or I'm going to shoot him.
Yep.
That don't happen, but they may take your money. Okay, now, walking into a white community, right, And I was chased out of a lot of white communities because I used to shine shoes, okay? And I never could figure out, they would chase us out of the communities, but they never would rob us. They never would take the money. And so when you have silence on this issue from players or community leaders, we equate silence with violence.
You're absolutely right. But I will also like to piggyback off of that to play devil's advocate here and ask you, and I can't wait for Dr. Dyson to come up here to ask him this question as well, because I remember a white individual by the name of Mark Cuban speaking out. And Mark Cuban talked about the prejudices that existed, and he said it's not, confined to just the white community. He says, I'm a white guy, you walking down the street and see a bunch of bald-headed white dudes with tattoos, and you thinking skinhead or something like that, and you ready to cross the street. You might look at black folks with a hoodie on or whatever the case may be, and you're still scared to walk the street. And so when we think about those stereotypes or how people may be viewed, we're having a white individual who is a billionaire owner of the Dallas Mavericks, honest and open enough to convey and express, this is what I feel. Here is why some white folks might feel that way. And instead of people absorbing it and embracing it and having a discussion about it, he was excoriated. So when we speak about these issues, my question to you is that, what do you say to white folks who could make the argument that they're provoked into silence because of how a lot of us may react to the words that they express and the feelings that they express?
I say diversity works. And this is why I use that term in terms of diversity work. Because 20 years ago, right, one of my biggest fights was to have diversity in media. Female, African Americans, because there was only white males in sports, particularly in basketball, covering the media.
As the president of the Players Association for the NBA, that's when you brought that up. I just wanted to make sure the audience knew that.
We appreciate that, by the way.
Well, no,
Just to let you know, honestly.
But again, diversity works, right? So we can have these conversations. So what I say to Amar Cuban is that he gives an example, but he's still speaking from a position of power. He's still looking at it from white males, and there's a position of perceived power in this relationship. When you are the minority in this country and you're dealing with that racialized box of the biases and stereotypes that he may not have to deal with, that's when we can have this conversation and really debate it and educate him, and he can educate us. But this is why diversity works, because now we get everyone's opinions. And when you have everyone's opinions, then you can come to a finite conclusion.
And you got to get to that point where you can get everybody's opinion, because I keep remembering what Chris Rock, the comedian extraordinaire, always says to me, Max, Molly, Isiah. Chris Rock said he was asked once to moderate a panel of African Americans discussing the plight and the issues of race and racism. He emphatically refused. I asked him why. He said, you want to have a real discussion about race? He said, put me in the neighborhood and give me a panel of white folks. He said, we know what racism is. Yeah. We know what we feel. Yeah. We know what we endure. We know what we go through. He said, rather than us bemoaning our situation like we always do, let them explain why some of them are the way that they are. That's a real discussion on race. To that you say what?
And I say he's absolutely right. But the only thing we all are really fighting for in this room and having this discussion about is, can we level the playing field? Can the rules be the rules for everyone? And everyone just wants an equal chance and an equal opportunity. That's all we're trying to get to. No one's asking for a handout. No one wants any type of advantage. And that's why sports is so beautiful, because it's me against you. We got referees. We got people watching. So you can't cheat. The best man wins. And this is what we're asking for in society. We just want a level playing field where it's my education against your education, my skill against your skill.
Your access to education versus someone else's
access to education is
that's a lopsided. Ain't nothing fair about that.
It's not. And what makes it really tricky for the African Americans sitting out here in this audience, when we were brought up, the opportunity and what was said to us in our household was education is the pathway out of poverty, right? Hit them books. When my parents migrated from Mississippi, they had one goal in mind. Hey, hit them books. There were days we didn't eat. There was no food in the house, but you had to get your homework done. You had to read. You had to hit them books, because this is your way out. When I came up, there was no NBA on television, right? Wasn't nobody saying, Isiah Thomas is going to be this NBA player, you're going to get that check. That is a false narrative that has been promoted out here, okay? The only thing that we was talked about in our household was education. That's the pathway out.
And the other thing that you said that really resonated with me beyond the education is, again, when people ask, what can we do, black, white, brown, yellow, whatever color you are, in terms of investing in the communities, going back to that recreation and play and having those programs to build that camaraderie, that really resonated. And I think that's profound, where people can begin to make a difference like you are, which we applaud. Your commitment, all the work you're doing, everything you said was so powerful, and we appreciate you, and we all need to follow your lead.
Well, thank you.
Isiah, thank you.
But play is important.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
They give you a ball before you get a book. And in the Egyptians and the Romans, you know, only the elite got a chance to participate in sport. Sport wasn't allowed for everyone. So when they come to all communities and the first thing they take out is sport and play, they are really crippling a lot of our kids in terms of their emotional and psychological growth.
And we also know an idle time's devil's playground. So, Isiah, thank you again. We so appreciate you. After the break, more here from Chicago. Stay with us. Professor and political analyst Michael Eric Dyson. This is a First Take special from Southside YMCA in Chicago. We'll be right back.